Sean Haney here with RealAgriculture.com and Real Ag Radio. And right now we are talking to Darrell Bricker. He is the CEO of IPSOS Public Affairs. His book is Empty Planet, The Shock of Global Population Decline. Darrell, how's it going?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me on.
This is great to chat with you. Honestly, people know I've read the book. I've promoted the book. I really think it's something that in agriculture we need to be very, very aware of, is this idea that we are not racing to 9 billion people by 2050.
And in fact, we aren't. It's very difficult to see how we could get there without some medical miracle that would make people live longer than they're living today significantly. And the reason is because we're just not having the number of kids really just about anywhere in the world that we used to have.
One of your other very, very interesting concepts is talking about immigration and having, the right. There's a whole bunch. Sometimes immigration is put into one lane. And there's multiple streams of it, some of it illegal and some of it the right way. You talk about the race for immigration, that this supply of immigrants is maybe not a forever thing.
No, it's not, and because immigration is essentially a young person's game. And the number of young people who are surplus population in various countries in the world is shrinking. So most of the immigration, if we want to talk specifically about Canada, that we get now is essentially from three countries, and that's India, China, and the Philippines. Pardon me. And all three of those countries have declining populations. China is now below replacement rate, which is 2.1 in terms of fertility rates. India is now right at replacement rate, and the Philippines is the only one that's above. And as a result of that, the number of people in those populations who are going to be around to consider moving to a place like Canada is not going to be as strong. The other thing that we know is that the biggest mover of people is economic opportunity. Yes, there's a lot of movement that happens in the world, but not nearly as much as we think as a result of war, pestilence, famine. Some people are arguing climate change. It's not that big a number. It's actually less than 1% of the world's population are refugees. So if you're talking about maximizing the immigration opportunity, it's usually driven by economics. So moving for economic gain is usually a young person's activity. 45-year-old people don't tend to immigrate.
Not really. No, unless there's a potato famine or something like that.
Yeah, unless there's a really good reason to do it, and they usually have higher levels of sunk cost. They have families that are there. They usually have worked out what their economic opportunity is going to be, what their career is going to be. So the motivation for them to move is not that great. And to be honest, we think that there's this huge immigrant population in the world. Only 3% of the world's population doesn't live in the country in which it was born.
So why does it get so much attention?
Because what's happening is that there's a large amount of cultural change that's taking place in some very specific parts of the world as a result of immigration. So, for example, Western Europe. It's not a huge number of people who are moving to Western Europe, but it's enough that what it's causing is cultural disaffection. In the United States, it's the nature of illegal immigration, particularly across the southern border in the United States, and they do get one of the largest shares of the world's immigrant population, so it is a significant issue there. But if you're talking about the overall global population moving to different countries, no, it's not really happening.
So from your perspective, if you look at Canada, are we doing immigration the right? Is it the way that you would do it? Is it the right way?
Well, and John Ebbetson and I argue in Empty Planet, it's an example for the rest of the world to follow. And the reason is because we don't look at immigration as many other people do, other countries do, as just a process of absorbing people who are in some type of political calamity, or they're dealing with famine or whatever. We're not dealing with populations that are in distress. We have a certain number of percentage of the Canadian population. It's actually less than 20 or of our immigrant population that comes in that are refugees. Almost all of the rest of it is either family reunification or even larger than that is people coming in basically as economic assets. So it's recruiting for us. It's rather than just dealing with distress someplace in the world.
Well, and I think your suggestion that Canada is a model for others. Even President Donald Trump has talked about, hey, look at Canada. They have a merit-based system. They're assigning scores. Even the U.S. is talking about our immigration system.
Right, but we're dealing with something different than what they're dealing with in Germany, where it's basically almost all refugees coming and people who are in difficult circumstances. So the scoring system wouldn't really make as much of a difference. And the benefit that we have is we're separated from that by an ocean.
Yeah, and I've been in Berlin where we see some of those Syrian refugees. The lineups and the amount of people is it's a visual you won't forget.
And the political impact on Germany is large.
So we were just having lunch, and we were just casually chatting, and I saw a number of people coming up and hearing them say to you, thank you so much for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. Why does this topic get so much attention from an audience like this, do you think? Like, why is it so magnetic for them?
Counterintuitive. The mantra, I think, in the agricultural industry is 9 billion people by the year 2050, and we have to get ready for that. And then you have somebody stand up and say it's probably not going to happen. And the reason it's not going to happen is for these very, very well documented data reasons, and suggesting to them what an alternate future is when they're absolutely convinced and they've been told so many times that something else is going to happen is a little shocking.
So our industry is very export reliant for the most part, besides poultry and dairy. What does that mean for us if some of these areas where we've been exporting, very like India and China and the growing middle class, how does all that impact our industry going forward?
Well, I mean, there's still going to be obviously export markets for those populations for a period longer than you and I are going to be here. But what we're going to start to see is a greater demand increasing in places like Africa, which is supposed to be agriculturally self-sufficient. But the truth is, as they become more affluent, their demands are going to get greater for different types of agricultural products. And so there's an opportunity there where Canadians probably don't see Africa as a huge export market for them. Agricultural exporters are going to have to start looking at places like that because that's who's going to have the growing populations.
Oh, great stuff. The book is called Empty Planet, The Shock of Global Population Decline. Darrell co-wrote it with John Ibbotson in the Globe and Mail. Fantastic book. I really, really recommend it to everybody. It's a great stocking stuffer, so to
say. Yes. If you have a big stocking, yes.
Darrell, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.